The grinder mentality that Randy and Brent Habert built into 44 Pro runs deep within our team. Every member shares a passion for the craft, the game, and most importantly, the player. When you step onto the field with a 44 Pro custom glove, you'll feel the difference. It's not just a glove, it's a 44 Pro. Crafted with dedication, made for performance, and built to last. Get your custom glove today at 44pro.com and experience the 44 Pro difference. That's 44pro.com, 44 Pro. Are you ready to take control of your health? At 4U Health, we believe wellness and lab testing should be accessible, inclusive, and yes, fun. With our tech-powered at-home lab test, you save time and money while feeling your best. Say goodbye to long waits and office visits. Check your health on your own terms with 4U Health. Visit 4uhealth.com today and free yourself from traditional medicine. That's the number 4uhealth.com.
Manipulation, money, and murder seem to hover around Michelle Williams, though only a few people have their suspicions. After all, it's hard to believe that someone would be capable of successfully staging not one, but two homicide scenes.
I believe she could talk her way, sleep her way out of anything.
But after Greg's shooting, investigators developed their own suspicions of Michelle's version of events.
But you've got to tell me the truth, okay?
For once, they aren't buying her charade. But what could have triggered this incident? Investigators were about to uncover a deception too intriguing to ignore.
I don't understand how she convinced so many people of so many things. I don't get it.
I've always thought that the one thing that would make Greg upset enough to hurt somebody would be you mess with his money or you mess with his wife.
From Dallas, Texas, this is Final Days on Earth, Season 3, The Life and Death of Greg Williams. Episode 4, The Timeline, Part 2. I'm your host, Claire Sanema. Thanks for listening. Leading up to Greg's shooting, there was very little to suggest that Greg had any current enemies or was on anyone's hit list. In fact, it appeared that all the stars had aligned for Greg and Michelle. Their dream house was about to become a reality the very next day. The audio is a bit rough here, but listen closely and you'll hear Michelle say, "We're closing on a house that we both love tomorrow. Money's not a problem. Relationship's not a problem. Everything was good until the middle of the night."
We went to bed very happy last night. We're closing on a house that we both love. Tomorrow, money's not a problem. Relationship's not a problem. Everything was good until the middle of the night.
The only hurdle in Greg's mood was, as you might recall, he hadn't been feeling all that well lately. Still, it wasn't enough to prevent him from attending his daughter Taylor's choir concert that evening. According to Michelle, when they returned home after the show, they organized their paperwork for the house and stayed up until 2 a.m., excited about the following day and their new home. The paperwork Michelle described was documented in police photos, on the nightstand in the bedroom, right next to Greg's body, so we can presume Greg did take a look at the bank documents. What Greg might not have known at the time, however, was that the paperwork he was reviewing was counterfeit.
It was obvious once they saw it, but it all went through all the different channels and no one caught it. It was, a bank account for Capital One that, just didn't exist. And yet there was a bank statement that I guess she had manufactured.
Do you think there was any way that Bryn would have found out that Michelle was stealing from Greg or cheating on him? Do you think if Bryn had found that out, he would have told Greg?
I think he would have. They were pretty close. There were plenty of times when he was working at the house while we were, out working on computers. And if you're just asking if there was an opportunity, I would say yes. I just don't know how likely that would be.
Knowing what we know about Michelle Williams, the lies about Taylor using drugs were just the tip of the iceberg.
I have no doubt I would be in one of two places if I were in that house. And that would be either jail or I would be dead.
Using Greg as her personal ATM was seemingly par for the course for Michelle, according to Greg's sister.
Greg was just her meal ticket out of that hole. They took 4 or 5 vacations a year. I think every time they went out to another country, she was probably hiding money in other places.
I remember how she would go to the ATM and take out as much money as she could almost every day. That she was just draining the accounts, and then because she was the bookkeeper, she was just fudging the numbers and pretending like the money was still there, even though it was long gone.
But there was an expiration date looming. The house closing was the very next day, and it looked as though her lies were about to be exposed.
Leading up to what happened that night, I would say that it was an accumulation of everything that had happened. To be honest, I wasn't aware of all of that till after the fact.
She may not have planned on killing him and things to go the way they went, but, you know, Greg was going to be her meal ticket one way or another.
I've pored over Michelle's 6.5-hour interview with police more times than I can count. To me, there are a few key moments when it feels like Michelle lets her guard down and might actually be telling the truth about what happened the night Greg died. Listen to this selection from the 4-hour mark. It's shortly after Michelle has told police that Greg killed himself and she covered it up. At this point, the investigator is no longer hammering her story. She's much more relaxed as she goes through the events again, with the suicide theory front and center. She talks about her 4-year-old daughter waking up in the middle of the night and trying to come into her parents' bedroom.
She never even got all the way to the bedroom. I heard her, so I met her right past the door and I said, let's go in there. Daddy doesn't feel good. And so I took her back to the couch.
Could it be that what woke up their daughter was actually the gunshot? Michelle's phrasing jumps out at me. She never even got all the way to the bedroom. Why would that detail matter? Unless there was a reason the little girl couldn't come inside. And what exactly did Michelle mean by Daddy doesn't feel good? Was it an innocent characterization, or the carefully chosen words of a femme fatale? The next time Michelle's words seem to reveal more than she intended occurs just a few minutes later, when she's talking about the injury to her face.
And then I started to really panic because I'm thinking, okay, now what do I do? And I knew I had to make it look as if it was a burglary. So I had to make it look like I caught him off guard coming out. I went like that, thinking I'll just have a little bruise, and that really backfired bad.
Did you catch that last part? Michelle said, that really backfired bad. I don't know about you, but the first association I have with backfiring is a gun, not a wrench.
The thing I couldn't understand is she was hit in the face with a wrench. She was way too vain. She would have never hit herself in the face with a wrench, ever.
Greg's sister believes it's possible that the backfire of Greg's gun, a .40 caliber pistol, could have inflicted Michelle's wound.
Because she'd handled that gun before at the gun range. Bryn had told me they all went to the gun range and that was too much gun for her, is how he put it.
Do you remember what Michelle herself said about Greg's gun in her police interview? It was a strange phrasing. She talked about it being a sexy gun and remembered that Greg had told her, you can't shoot it, but it looks good in your hands.
Greg let me try it. We just bought the gun, and I really suck at it. And the joke always was, it was a sexy gun, and that's what I say. So you can't shoot it, but it looks good in your hands.
The truth about Michelle's injury might just be hiding in plain sight.
Why couldn't that mark on her face be the backfire of that gun that was too big for her to fire?
We know we can't take Michelle's words at face value, so we have to look to other sources to establish the timeline. Greg's computer showed his last email activity was at 2:46 a.m. 2 hours later, at 4:40 a.m., Michelle made that frantic 911 call. And in between, she admitted to cleaning up the scene and staging a home invasion. Considering everything that went down, it's actually a pretty tight schedule for a murder and cover-up. It certainly must have helped Michelle out that her 4-year-old daughter slept through the shooting, which happened just outside her makeshift bed on the couch. Here again is Kathy Williams, Greg's first wife.
After I started putting the pieces together, I went to the police department and gave my statement, and I requested they drug test the baby because there was no way that little 4-year-old could sleep where she was sleeping and not hear a gunshot without being woken up. But yet again, they just thought I was the crazy ex-wife.
I still can't believe that. Every time I go back through the details of that story, the fact that their daughter slept through the murder has always stood out to me as very suspicious.
Yes, so she had to have been drugged not to hear the gunshot.
It's disturbing to think that Michelle would drug her own child at the tender age of 4, but it's not the first time this possibility has been raised. Steve McSwain had been a spectator on the sidelines for much of Michelle's drama.
And what people don't know is that Michaela went to the hospital one time, that she had, I guess, been overdosed with these drugs. And then after Michelle was drugged and she spent, I don't know, like 2 or 3 days in the hospital, I think we started realizing that it wasn't Taylor that was doing this, it was Michelle. I like to think I have some good detective skills myself, and it just didn't make sense what I was seeing and finding, so that's the conclusion that I had to come to, because everything that was being said about Taylor didn't seem to be true. The reports that Michelle was showing me, it was indicating that Taylor was this very bad, evil child, but when it's all said and done, I believe those reports were doctored, and Michelle was actually driving all of this.
Despite Steve's growing concerns about Michelle, he remained in close contact with her. And after Michelle's marathon interview with police, it's Steve she called to pick her up from the Keller police station.
The morning was just a surreal thing. I mean, it was like my whole world was turned upside down.
Although he had his suspicions, Steve tried to keep an open mind about Michelle, and he agreed to give her a ride home that afternoon.
I didn't form any opinion. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, but then going back into the house and seeing, we went in there later and we cleaned up the bedroom.
When Steve saw the crime scene firsthand, he was faced with the cold, hard facts.
And it was kind of hard not to think that she did it. And especially if you know Greg, you're going to come in there, do what you got to do and get out of there, because if he wakes up, he's probably going to win the battle.
On the next episode of Final Days on Earth, the life and death of Greg Williams. 3 months after Greg's murder, there's finally an arrest in the case.
Thought they would go in and see all the bullshit she did, and she would be arrested. She would go down. I didn't know anyone was going to believe any of the nonsense she was putting out there.
Final Days on Earth is produced in Dallas, Texas for Rebel Studios. Each episode is reported and written by me, Claire Sanamaw, and Susan Passoni. Original theme music composed and performed by Riley Simmons. Additional music licensed from PremiumBeat.com is Bending Truth and A Thin Line. Special thanks to Kathy Williams, Taylor Williams, Michelle Fletcher, and Steve McSwain for talking to me in this episode. If you have any information about the cases I cover, please get in touch through my website, finaldaysonearth.com. If you want to support this show, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening right now.